Okay, so it's 7. We'll go ahead and get started. Thank you all for coming. We have some great turnout today. I know a few of you have already put your names in the chat box, but please make sure to do so we can count you for attendance. This is like one of the last attendance point opportunities, so
Well, yeah.
want to make sure that you do that. Other updates, yesterday we started the winter Instagram challenge that Shannon made. It's so beautiful. It was posted in the GroupMe and on Facebook, so we don't have a prize for it yet that we've decided on, but you guys can go ahead and get started on that. Also, we'll probably do another collage like picture today, so take a selfie of you at any time. And we'll get a Dropbox for that going. But I don't really have any other updates. I guess I will pass it on to Shannon now. She is going to do the little spinny thing for the November challenge to see who our winner is.
Yes. Okay. Do I have access to screen sharing right now?
Yes.
I do. Okay. Awesome. Oh, thanks, Grace. I love you. You're my literal hero. Let me do this. And as you know, it's only for people that are here. So let's go. And it looks like it's Hannah. Is she here?
I don't think she is here.
I'm having PTSD from last time. Okay, we'll sit again. And Tatum, is she here?
I am here.
Yay! Congrats, Tatum.
Thank you.
Okay, stopping the share. Good job.
Awesome. Thank you, Tatum. Thank you to everyone who participated. You
Yes,
won.
your turkeys were so cute. I couldn't
So
help
cute.
but post them all because they're so cute.
They were great. So you won a free spring membership. Cassidy will reach out to you this week about that. But
Perfect. Thank you so much.
yes, thank you. All right, and now I'm going to pass it on to Erin. She is going to lead us in our discussion tonight, which we're super excited about.
Hi, everyone. My name's Erin. I'm a registered dietitian, and I'm just going to talk to you about some nutrition basics. I know you guys sent in like a lot of questions and things like that, so I'm just excited to have a discussion with everybody. I've got my tea here. I've got some resources for you, so I think it's going to be a good evening with you all. Give me 1 second, and I'm going to share my screen here. All right. Can everybody see this? Just give me a thumbs up. Fantastic. Okay, great. So just a little background information on myself. I went to Michigan State. I got my bachelor's in dietetics from Michigan State, and then I did my dietetic internship at the VA Medical Center in Cleveland. And I got my master's while I was there at Case Western. And now I'm working at the VA. I'm working at the VA in Portland, Oregon, doing nutrition education, nutrition counseling, and building a lot of their curriculums for their new whole health program. Just a little background on me. What I'm thinking about doing for tonight is kind of going through just some basic information that I think hits a lot of the questions that people had. I'll try to go through it a little bit quickly so that we can allow for enough time for any questions at the end. Hopefully it hits a lot of your questions, and then at the end of this presentation, I kind of put together a lot of the questions that you guys had asked in the form beforehand, so we can go through some of those as well. All right, so just to kind of kick it off, hit some of those basic tips. So first, choose nutrient-dense whole foods. So things like non-starchy vegetables, fruits, healthy fats and oils, high-quality meat, fish, eggs, nuts, seeds, beans, and lentils, 100% whole grains, gluten-free grains if that's necessary for you. And these are kind of what you want to focus on. And we're going to go into more detail in the presentation later about where you can get these foods and what that should look like. Things you should try to limit, things like added sugars, refined grains, vegetable oils, processed trans and saturated fats, artificial sweeteners, chemicals, additives, things like that. I just want to highlight that the word that I chose here is to limit, not avoid. It's unrealistic to always assume that you can avoid everything. You don't want to create that kind of avoidance or fear mindset for yourself. And that's not realistic. It's not sustainable. Often it's impractical. So just wanted to highlight that it's try to limit these types of foods as best you can, but it's okay if you slip up. It's okay if that's not possible or realistic for you 100% of the time. Just do your best. This is the plate method. So this is a really simple way to kind of aim and, you know, make sure you're getting and hitting all those nutrient dense foods without being super strict about calories or macros or things like that. This is a super easy way just to visualize your plate, make sure you're getting in all those key parts. So just to kind of look at this, half your plate should be full of those non-starchy vegetables. That's going to be things like broccoli, Brussels sprouts, asparagus, tomatoes, things like that. A quarter of your plate can be those grains and starches, so more of those starchy carbohydrates. That might be sweet potatoes, it could be rice, it could be bread. What you choose to put there is up to you and your own preferences. It could also be a second vegetable. You don't have to have a starch if you don't want to at every meal. So it also could be a second vegetable. And then the other quarter of your plate is going to be protein. So it could be chicken, it could be turkey, it could be a plant-based protein. So that could be beans or lentils or something like that. And that's going to be a majority of your plate. And then if you can see, I have a couple of other things surrounding this that you might want to consider. Off to the side there, you have healthy fats. You don't need a lot of healthy fats. A little bit goes a long way, so that's why they're not one of those main sections of the plate, but you do want to include some healthy fats at your meals. This could be avocado, nuts and seeds, maybe cheese if you eat dairy products, something like that. It could be the oil that you cook your foods in. So if you saute your vegetables or roast anything, it could be the oil that compromises as that healthy fat. And then on the side, water as your main beverage. And then off to the side here where those three circles are, I have some other things that you don't need to, they're not part of the main plate because you don't have to have them at every single meal, but they're things that you could sprinkle in your meals throughout the day or to enhance any of your meals, but they don't have to be part of your plate every time. Things like fruit, maybe aiming to get 1 serving of fruit a day. It could be more, but that would be the goal. Again, doesn't have to be with every plate. Dairy or a dairy alternative, if you don't do dairy, could be maybe at dinner, maybe at breakfast, but doesn't have to be 3 times a day. And then something else to think about is fermented foods. Things like yogurt, kombucha, kimchi, sauerkraut, kefir. You don't have to have these at every meal, but by including them occasionally, they're super great for your gut health. They give you a lot of those probiotics. So just, you know, those things on the side are just things to think about on occasion. And then in the corner, another thing I like to bring up, again, I kind of touched on this in the previous slide, but things to also bring to every meal: self-compassion, self-love, I don't know why I put fermented foods there. It doesn't fit there. That needs to be changed. But you just want to make sure you're not too strict with your diet. You're not too hard on yourself. We want to make sure that we're still enjoying the foods that we like too, and bringing enjoyment and compassion to our meals. This is an example of what a healthy plate could look like. So you can see that this is sectioned off similarly. You have your non-starchy vegetables on half a plate. They're not the same vegetable. It could be, this part's a quarter broccoli, a quarter salad. The whole plate could be, or the whole half of the plate could just be broccoli. It could look different, but it has those non-starchy vegetables. A quarter of the plate, you have those grains. The other quarter, you have about 4 ounces of meat and then water on the side. So that's what an example in practice of a healthy plate could look like. When you're building your plate, a couple things to keep in mind. Quality over quantity is what's important. So you want to just be choosing those quality foods. Sometimes you don't have to have a ton of food. Everybody's appetite is going to vary and be different. But you just want to choose those quality foods when you're at the grocery store, because when you're buying that, that's going to be a great foundation to build off of. Another thing is sustainability. And what I mean by sustainability, because this could be interpreted different ways, is trying to pick a diet plan, not even a diet plan, but the way that you eat should be sustainable. So I usually recommend that you pick a plan that you can do for a long time. Often we get caught in the trap of choosing some type of short-term plan to finally reach our goals or to lose that last 10 pounds. But often what happens is that short-term plan will work for the first month, and then we're not actually learning how to build those healthy habits. So as soon as the plan's over, we end up gaining that weight back or going back to old eating habits that can ruin our health. So choose something that's going to be sustainable for you that you can incorporate into your lifestyle. Another thing to mention is that nutrition is personal. And what I mean by this is that everybody is different in every way. So one diet plan that works for somebody and they were very successful with might not work the same way for you. The amount of calories that you get recommended for one person might not be the same amount of calories that somebody else needs. If someone needs to avoid certain foods, you might not need to avoid those certain foods. So everything is going to be super personal. What you need to feel really comfortable and feel really healthy and have enough energy and all these great things is going to just vary. And so it just takes a little bit of experimentation to figure out what that is for you. I also like to talk about this too, because there is so much nutrition information out there, especially with social media, and nutrition is so nuanced that oftentimes we can take something that, some short thing that's on Twitter or on TikTok or something, and they could say one thing, but it's so nuanced that one fact that they put out there doesn't necessarily apply to everybody. So it's just important to take those types of things with a grain of salt, because unless they know your medical history, unless they know your habits and your physical activity and all of these different little components, you can't get the best nutrition recommendations for you personally. So just remember that nutrition's personal, and remember that when you incorporate any information that you're getting out there. Just to dive a little deeper into those components of the plate that we talked about, I just want to touch on some important things when we talk about each of those. Protein makes you feel full, and that's why it's one reason that it's important to include on your plate and with any snacks. It's satiating, which means it will help you feel full for a longer amount of time if you include it. It helps with muscle repair and maintaining any muscle mass, which is important, especially if you're physically active and as you get older. the best thing to do is spread protein throughout the day. Based on how you metabolize protein, you're really going to benefit the most from the protein that you're eating if it's spread out throughout the day versus including it all at dinner or including it all at breakfast. You want to evenly spread it out. So I usually recommend, again, it's going to be different for everybody, but I usually recommend between 25 and 30 grams of protein at each meal. This could look like 4 ounces of meat, 2 to 3 eggs. 4 ounces is usually going to be about the size of your palm or a deck of cards. If you just want to eyeball it, you'll usually get pretty close using that. Carbohydrates, it's the body's preferred source of energy, so they are important for you to include. And we can talk, I know there's a lot of questions about the keto diet or low carbohydrate diet, and we can talk about that later. But carbohydrates aren't just your high carb foods that you think of like bread and grains. There's carbohydrates in vegetables, there's carbohydrates in, you know, everything. So you can get carbohydrates from a variety of foods besides just those high carb ones that we think of. But it does include starches, grains, those non-starchy vegetables, and fruit. You want to choose fiber-rich sources because fiber is going to be super important, and not enough people get enough fiber. And limit those refined sources. So that's going to be like choosing a whole grain bread versus a white bread. Choosing, you know, your non-starchy vegetables versus veggie chips, things like that. And some people may need to limit how much of those high carbs that they eat for blood sugar control or other medical reasons, but they're still important to include, even if you have to limit the high starch ones. So serving sizes could look like a half a cup of grain, that's like half a cup of rice, that's gonna fill about a quarter of that plate. 1 piece of fruit, things like that is gonna get you what you need. And I usually, you know, if you stick to that quarter of the plate being those high carbohydrate grains and starches, you'll do pretty good. Those non-starchy vegetables, you'll still get carbohydrate from them, but they're not going to affect your blood sugar as much. So you can eat a larger quantity of those and you're still going to get a lot of fiber and vitamins and minerals. That's why those non-starchy vegetables are half the plate versus a quarter of the plate. So examples of those: cucumbers, your dark leafy greens, green beans, mushrooms, things like that. Healthy fats, which I touched on briefly. Those are also going to be satiating. Those are also going to help make you feel full. They're also going to help you absorb any fat-soluble vitamins that you might be getting from all of your fruits and vegetables. So they are an important part to include in your diet. You just want to get them from those healthy sources. So avocado, olive oil, avocado oil, maybe you get them from nuts and seeds, things like that. Here are some more examples. Your fatty fish can also be your protein source. So if you eat meat, fatty fish is a great way to get omega-3 fatty acids, which are super great for you. And then there was a question about hydration as well. So you want to drink fluids throughout the day, preferably water. The best way to tell if you're adequately hydrated is to check your urine color. So if you're urinating about every 2 to 4 hours and it's a light yellow in color, you're probably pretty hydrated. You're staying adequately hydrated. You can also aim to get about half your body weight in ounces. That could be a good way to figure out what your goal water intake should be. There was some questions specifically about what we need to eat if we want to gain muscle or for different workouts that we do if we're really physically active. These are some things that are just rules of thumb. So for pre-workouts, you obviously want to fuel your body for the workout with your food. So you want to focus on getting those carbohydrates and protein in. because you want to fuel your muscle, you want to get energy, and you want to focus on those easy and quick to digest carbohydrates. You want your blood sugar to go up slightly to give you that energy and fill your cells with glucose. So things that are quick and easy, you don't want super high fiber foods because those are just going to make you feel really full and lethargic during a workout. And then it is important to eat some protein before your workout as well, because even though it is for muscle recovery and repair, it can help with that recovery and repair when you're eating it before the workout as well. And then of course, hydration, you don't want to go into a workout dehydrated because that can hurt your performance. Looking at post-workout, you want to focus on the carbohydrates and protein as well as including some fat. So you want to have those carbohydrates to replenish your energy that you lost during your workout. We talked about muscle recovery and repair for protein, and then for hydration, replenishing any fluids lost. And then for fat, it can just help with calories and any caloric intake to give your body that energy as well. So I usually recommend trying to pair, when you're trying to plan like a pre or post workout snack or meal, trying to pair a protein with a carbohydrate. So you can pair something with the list on the left with something from the list on the right to create a really balanced snack. So for example, you could do peanut butter and an apple, and that's something from the left, something from the right. You have a little bit of protein and a little bit of carbohydrate. It could be string cheese and celery. So anything with that combination is gonna hit the balance well. Things with the asterisks, so like homemade trail mix or Greek yogurt, will have a little bit of carbohydrate in it as well, so that in itself is a balanced snack. And just remember that eating balanced meals throughout the day is what's going to have the biggest impact on your workouts. So there is a lot of focus on what do I eat before workout, what do I eat after a workout, different supplements, things like that. And ultimately, it's the pattern of what you're eating throughout the entire day that's going to make the biggest difference. You could have the best pre and post workout snacks, but if the other meals outside of that aren't great, it's not going to make a difference on your performance, what you're eating before and after. Again, nutrition is personal, so you need to experiment what's going to work for you. I know, like for myself, I can't eat like more than 4 hours, like any earlier than 4 hours before a workout, and like I won't feel great. But that's not going to apply to everybody, and it just takes some experimentation to figure out what works for you. But if you notice that you have low energy going into a workout, try adding a little bit more carbohydrate beforehand. If you notice that you're feeling sluggish more than normal, maybe you have too much fat and you need to replace that with a little bit more carb and protein. So just kind of troubleshooting it till you figure out where the sweet spot is for yourself. And I just kind of want to end that portion by saying that the theme of all of this is that you should just be curious about what works well for you and just experiment with a variety of foods and meal practices to figure out what works best for your body, because that's what is the most important part. Okay, before I go into the question portion, I just want to share one other thing with you guys. I got a lot of questions about meal prep, how to eat healthy on a budget, how to eat healthy in college, things along that spectrum. So I did create a resource for everybody, and it's in a PDF. I sent it to Cassidy, and I can send it to anybody else that needs it, to send out to everybody that's here so that you have it on file. But I just want to go through what that resource includes for you guys. Hold on. Okay. All right, can everybody see this okay? Okay. So here I just have a diagram of what that healthy plate is so that you have it to remember. And then I kind of worked it out here of what could be included in each part of that healthy plate. We've already talked about this, but I just want to show you my thought process of laying this out. Obviously, this is not a comprehensive list of all the foods that could be included, but it gives you an idea of what belongs where. And then just to give you a starting point, the arrows here, anywhere there's an arrow, it just signifies that that food could belong in either of those food groups. So, for example, nuts and seeds could be a healthy fat, but they're also full of protein. So that could be your protein for a meal, or it could be your healthy fat for a meal. Fatty fish like salmon could be your protein. It could also be your healthy fat for a meal. Things like dairy or dairy alternatives, that could also be your healthy fat for a meal. Beans and legumes, they could be your starch, but if you're a vegetarian or a vegan, that could also be your protein for the meal. So it's not black and white, but it gives you an idea, and you can kind of see how to customize the plate for yourself and give you a good starting point. This could be an example of things that you would want to buy at the grocery store. I think that having staple foods that you know that you can make like a good amount of meals with is a really great start. So if you have foods that you know you like, that you know are versatile, that you can kind of stock up on, and if you're low on food or you didn't make it to the grocery store that week, you know you can create a good amount of meals. So for me, that's things like having canned tuna around, having canned tomatoes so I can make a quick spaghetti sauce with pasta. These types of things that are super budget friendly, that you can bulk up with vegetables or things like that, can be important to have around, and just identifying what those staple foods look like for you. So this is just an example. So I mentioned I like having canned or dried beans around, canned tuna or salmon, nut butters. I like having whole grain tortillas because you can make tacos or breakfast burritos or wraps. So they're very versatile. Having frozen foods just to extend the shelf life of foods, things like that. So that's an example. And then I also have different tips for budget meal planning and prepping. So things like what foods to freeze, what foods to buy frozen, trying to buy non-perishables in bulk because the cost per unit is going to be down, and those foods will last a lot longer since they're shelf stable. Buying protein's usually the most expensive component. So if you are looking to save money, shopping for protein sources such as beans or eggs, or I mentioned canned tuna or peanut butter, are going to be less expensive, or buying frozen meat or fish when it's on sale because it will last you a lot longer if you can leave it in the freezer until you're ready to cook it. And then I usually recommend, well, my favorite thing to do is to batch meal prep, which basically means you are batch cooking individual ingredients that can be used in multiple different meals throughout the week versus batch cooking one meal 5 times to be ate throughout the day. Everyone is different and everyone has different preferences, and if you like meal prepping where you cook rice and chicken and broccoli and you put it in Tupperware and you have it for lunch every day throughout the week, good on you. That's perfect. That works for you. I get tired of the same meal every week, and so that doesn't work well for me. So what I like to do is I'll pick a protein and a grain and a couple of vegetables that I know can be used with different food staples that I usually have around. So for example, I'll choose brown rice, maybe a couple of vegetables, like some sweet potato and some broccoli, and then a protein, and I'll pre-cook my rice, and I'll put that in the refrigerator to be used throughout the day or the week. I'll cook some ground beef and have that cooked, and then maybe one day I'll add that ground beef to tomato sauce that I have and add it to pasta. The next day I'll use that same ground beef that I made on Monday and add taco seasonings to it and use it with whole wheat tortillas that I have. So I'm using that same ground beef that I already made in 3 or 4 different meals throughout the week. Why I like doing it this way is that, one, it does cut down on cook time. So if you're super busy and you have a really busy schedule, you're only cooking that meat once. So on Tuesday, when you're making tacos, your meal prep time is cut down in half because all you're doing is warming up what you already cooked and adding seasoning to it. So it helps kind of cut out time. And then also you're cutting out time without getting tired of the same food. So yes, you're using my example of ground beef throughout the week, but you're able to use different flavors. So one night it's more Italian, one night it's more Mexican, and that kind of gets rid of like food fatigue of eating the exact same meals every day. So that's the way that I like to do it. But again, whatever works best for you. But I have some tips on how to kind of batch cook like that. And then the next page, I have suggestions of different versatile meals that you can use your batch cooked recipes for. So like I mentioned, pasta or tacos or a sheet pan meal or things like that, and how to incorporate your batch cooked meals that way. I also made 2 different recipes that use a lot of like the stuff I talked about in the beginning. This website called Budget Bites, I really like. So if you need good recipes or good tips for meal prepping, that's a really awesome website to have. Both of these recipes are from her website, and she prices everything out. So I didn't include that on here, but if you go on her website and look at a recipe, she prices out what each ingredient per serving would cost you and what the total cost of the recipe would be. So if you're really looking to like budget shop and eat healthy on a budget, that's a really good resource to have, just to give you some ideas. So I included a couple to get you started on that. And then this last page, I just included my contact information because I know a couple of people asked for that. So this is the best email to contact me. If you know Cassidy, you can also reach me through her. And then a couple of other things that you could use. So these are social media accounts that I really like to follow that I think are very reliable for providing nutrition information. Just a couple I want to point out so that you know what it is. At College Nutritionist, she does a really good job of very easy meals. So she posts a lot of very like lazy cooking recipes. She has a blog. If you go to her website, collegenutritionist.com, she has a lot of blogs that are geared towards college students. So if you're looking for something specific that's relevant to that kind of age group or, section, then she is very informational. At Pickup Limes is really great. She's a registered dietitian that focuses on plant-based eating and vegan eating. So if you want to transition to a more plant-based eating style, or you are vegetarian or vegan, or you're not, but you want to maybe just include more plant-based recipes throughout the week, she has an awesome YouTube channel, and her website is full of plant-based recipes and how to transition to a plant-based lifestyle. Let me see. At Dietitian Anna is great for intuitive eating and eating disorders. So if you struggle with disordered eating or your relationship with food, and that's something that you want to focus on more and you're looking for good accounts to follow for that, I really like her. Let me see, the last two, Flourishing Heights and Shaped by Charlotte. Flourishing Heights posts a lot of things that is geared towards women. So she's a registered dietitian as well. I think everyone on this list is a registered dietitian. But she focuses on nutrition specifically for women and like hormones for women and different things like that. And then I really like Shaped by Charlotte's Instagram. She posts a lot of really informative videos and things. I really think it's a lot of reliable information. I already mentioned Budget Bites. And then something else I wanted to mention is Imperfect Foods. It's a program where you can, it's basically like grocery delivery, but the groceries that gets delivered is basically extra. It gets turned away from grocery stores for a variety of reasons. So it's basically a way to cut down on food waste, but because of the way that it's like the supply chain of it, you get it for a much cheaper cost, even though the quality is fine. So that's a good way to buy food at a lower cost. And it's a good way to like eat seasonally and try different types of produce and stuff like that that might be out of your comfort zone, just so that you can increase the variety of foods that you're eating. And then finally, one app, I get questions about apps a lot. And one app that I really like to use if you want to like track what you're eating or things like that is I like the app called 8. It doesn't do calorie tracking or anything like that because I'm not a huge proponent of that, but it allows you to like take a picture of your meals and kind of track things so that you can see any patterns and things like that. And so I think that's a really great approach to food tracking. So that's that resource. If you want it, you can reach out to, I think someone said someone in the chat box will send it to you. But Cassidy or someone who has it can send it to you. Okay. Let me go back to this. All right. Before I go into questions that were asked on the form, we can open it up to any audience questions right now, if anybody has any.
If no one else has one, I have one. I guess like something I'm always curious about is supplements and stuff. So do you like believe in supplements, or do you like think that there's any like good ones or ones that are kind of useless or anything?
Yeah, that's a good question. Just supplements in general is kind of vague. There's so many different types of supplements on the market. So the range of what could be considered a supplement is large. A supplement is considered, you know, like a dietary supplement, like a magnesium supplement or a multivitamin or vitamin D. And then you also have supplements like protein supplements, protein powders, detox teas, apple cider vinegar gummies. These are all considered supplements. One thing I like to point out about dietary supplements is that it's important to know that they're not regulated at all. So how food is regulated or how drugs are regulated by the FDA or the USDA, either of those, supplements are not regulated. And this is important to know because it basically means that companies that produce supplements can do whatever they want. And no one's really checking up on them to make sure that it's like safe practices. So the quality of supplements that you're buying is really important, because if you're buying a very low quality supplement, it's very easy for that company to say that this is what's in the supplement and then be putting something completely different in it, or lying to you or using poor quality ingredients or things like that. So if you are buying a supplement, quality is super important. And then in terms of like supplements I recommend or if I believe in. I don't think a lot of dietary supplements are super beneficial if you have a good diet. If you are eating a variety of foods and you're getting good quality foods, you shouldn't need any type of supplements. But in some cases, supplements can be helpful. One example I like to use is vitamin D. I don't know, in Michigan, in the winter, you're not really getting a lot of sun, and sun is the main source of vitamin D. So likely you're vitamin D deficient, and vitamin D deficiency has been linked to a lot of different risk factors. So a vitamin D supplement would probably be helpful for you. Again, just buying a high quality vitamin D supplement. I also like to recommend magnesium for different things. I think a lot of people are deficient in magnesium. So that's another supplement that I'll recommend. And again, those types of things are going to be super personalized based on what your diet looks like, where you're living, and whatever your health conditions are. So I think in those aspects, dietary supplements can be helpful. But if you're just taking a dietary supplement just because you've seen something about it or that it promotes weight loss or something like that, it likely doesn't. And if it does, that weight loss will not be sustainable. And oftentimes the quality is going to be questionable. So that's just something to take into consideration.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I had a question about like sugar-free like additions, I guess, like a lot of stuff in terms of coffee, like stevia versus just like actual sugar. Like, is sugar-free stuff bad? Like I've heard it like artificial is like worse than real sugar. I don't know. Just
yeah, that's a question. And that is really confusing. And one reason it's confusing is because the research on artificial sweeteners is kind of mixed. So there is no conclusive, this is bad for you or this is good for you. I think for a lot of artificial sweeteners, the FDA has categorized them as GRAS, which means generally recognized as safe. So a lot of the research that's out that it has negative effects of artificial sweeteners, that's usually because one, they're rat studies, and two, the doses of artificial sweeteners they use in those research studies is far, far beyond what you would actually be consuming, that it's likely that the realistic amounts that are in foods is safe for you to consume without any of those negative side effects. And I think oftentimes if you're eating an artificial sweetener, you might be eating like a processed food or something. So I think when you think about it like that, just by consuming less artificial sweeteners, maybe you're consuming more of those whole foods that are going to offer you more nutrition. So that's something to take into consideration. But ultimately, my opinion is that if you like the real food that has real sugar and that's what you enjoy and you enjoy the taste, like it's fine to eat on occasion. And I wouldn't, restrict yourself from those foods just because it doesn't have an artificial sweetener in it or because there's a low sugar version. Oftentimes the sugar-free versions don't taste as good. And so it's really not going to satisfy that craving that you have for it. You might as well just have a little bit of the one, like the full sugar version, get rid of the craving and then move on with your life. There is like a caveat. A lot of sugar-free foods, if they don't use artificial sweeteners like stevia or things like that, which I do really like stevia. I think that's the best artificial sweetener in terms of research. They'll also use sugar alcohols. So oftentimes you'll find sugar alcohols sugar alcohols are usually the ingredients that end in OL, like xylitol or mannitol or something like that. usually in like sugar-free ice cream or gum or cookies. And while they're not terrible for your health, a lot of people have GI or gut issues when they eat a lot of sugar alcohols. So just for kind of any tummy issues or digestive issues, that might be one to avoid if you notice that you're kind of sensitive to foods that have a lot of sugar alcohols in them. So that's something to think about.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Do you agree with the 80-20 rule?
Yes, I do. I really like the 80-20 rule. Basically, what that means, if you haven't heard of it before, is that 80% of your diet should be a lot of those healthy whole foods. And then 20% of your diet can kind of come from maybe foods that are less healthy that you really enjoy eating. I think that can be a really good rule of thumb for people. I'm not into those super restrictive diets or feeling forced to restrict any foods that you genuinely enjoy eating. So I think the 80-20 rule is a good balance of that.
Perfect, thank you.
Mhm.
I have a question.
Mhm.
So, coconut oil. So I'm actually taking H&F 150 right now.
Yeah,
And
I
like,
TA'd for that.
yes, like a lot of people say coconut oil is healthy, you put it in with your healthy fats, but in that class, she said like it's high in saturated fat and that it's not good for you. And so now I'm just really confused because I'm feeling like I'm getting a lot of mixed stuff on that. And
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, I understand your confusion and frustrations because that is my life, and that is nutrition pretty much in a nutshell. Um, Nutrition research is still it's a very, very young science, and nutrition research is also very hard to do because nutrition is so personal. Nutrition science is just genuinely hard to carry out because there's so many other cofactors and all this. But the saturated fat, avoid it, low fat, don't eat it recommendation is very outdated. There has been a lot of research to say that saturated fat is not as bad for us as we once thought that it was. And obviously, that comes with caveats. You want to get your saturated fat from healthy sources. Just because we think that saturated fat isn't as bad for us as we once thought doesn't mean you can eat a ton of fried foods. Like, it still matters where you're getting your saturated fat from. But where we once thought that you couldn't have any, that turns out it's not really the case with a lot of the new research that it's coming out. So with that said, I won't say that coconut oil is unhealthy for you, but I think there are two extremes, and nutrition's usually right in the middle of those extremes. So just because it's not unhealthy for you doesn't mean it's the healthiest oil for you either. So with coconut oil, I usually fall in like have it every once in a while if you like it. It does have like a higher smoke point, which means you can heat it to higher temperatures than like an olive oil. So for certain recipes can be better to cook with. And in those instances, I think that's fine. But I also don't think it's the superfood that people claim that it is either. Just because you cook with coconut oil doesn't mean your food's ultimately healthier. So I think it's just if you like it, use it. Don't make it your main oil, but you can definitely include it without fearing of being unhealthy.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I had a question on like I saw that you included a lot of plant-based protein options and things in your list, and I was just wondering what your opinion of like the vegan diet is, because I've heard a lot of like negative things from nutritionists saying things about it, so I just wanted to hear your perspective.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, and I tried to include I tried to make that resource as applicable to everybody as I possibly could. So if you could tell, you could probably gauge my opinion just from what I put on the resource, because I included both meat options and plant-based options. And that's basically because I think that it's whatever works best for you ultimately. I don't think choosing a camp and sticking to it and then believing that everybody also needs to belong to that same camp is the right approach. So if you follow a vegan diet for moral reasons or because you feel better, you just generally feel healthier on a vegan diet, fine. Make sure that you are eating a healthy vegan diet, because there is a way to eat an unhealthy vegan diet. So you want to make sure that if you are going to follow like a plant-based or vegan diet, you're doing it healthfully. And that's fine. But if you enjoy eating meat or you enjoy eating dairy products and you don't want to give those things up, you don't have to give those things up to be healthy. There is a way to still be healthy and include those foods if you enjoy eating them. I think there is research to show health benefits with a vegan diet, but ultimately the reason for that is because they're including more vegetables and more fiber, and those are things that you can do while still including meat. So a lot of the benefits that come with a vegan or vegetarian diet aren't because you're not including the meat, it's just because they're including more of what you should be. And I also think that another reason why a vegan or vegetarian diet isn't going to be applicable to everybody is, again, because nutrition is very personal, both on the what your lifestyle is aspect, but also biochemically, everyone is so different and our genes are so different. The way that we metabolize food is a lot different. And so some people just do better on a vegan diet than others just because of basic biochemistry. Sometimes we have genes that more easily can get the bioavailable nutrients from foods easier than others. So for some people that follow a vegan diet and they don't feel that great on it, they don't feel really healthy and they really struggle, likely it's because maybe just the way that their genes are, their DNA, they have a harder time actually accessing all the bioavailable nutrients in foods, and they end up becoming very nutrient deficient. So it's not applicable for everybody, but if you feel really good on it and you enjoy doing it, then good on you.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Julia asked if there's any tips on foods that benefit our skin or help to prevent acne.
Okay, that's a good question. This could go in a variety of ways, mainly because you would need to figure out what the root issue with your acne or your skin is. Are you breaking out because of hormones, because it's around the time of your period? Are you breaking out because you have a food intolerance or sensitivity that you don't know about? There could be a variety of reasons for that. I think in general, things that you could do, just to generalize it, make sure you're drinking enough water. If you are getting a good diet, meaning high fiber, lots of omega-3 fatty acids, you're getting a variety of those fruit and vegetables so that you can make sure you're getting adequate amounts of vitamins and minerals. That's all going to benefit your skin. And then I think if it is a chronic issue, seeing a dietitian, but also what you could do is keep a food diary or like a food symptom tracking log to figure out if there's certain foods that trigger breakouts. So I think finding patterns of what you eat to when you notice your skin getting worse, that can be helpful. If you track your period, noticing if like, oh, I tend to break out the week before my period, or I tend to break out, that can kind of give you a clue as to what might be the issue. And I think those are my general recommendations for it. Figuring out if you have a food intolerance, figuring out if it's hormones, and then just making sure that you eat a good varied diet that's lower in high fat foods, high sugar foods, processed foods, things like that.
I have a
I have a
question.
quick question.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay. I have a quick question. Do you have any tips for like dining hall meals and stuff like that?
Yeah, I do. I just wasn't sure if it would be the most applicable right now, but I actually do have like a resource or a PowerPoint on that as well. I think basically in terms of eating at the dining hall, one, if you follow the plate method, that can be a super good way to make sure that you're eating well. Just by visualizing, do I have enough non-starchy vegetables? Do I have a protein? Do I have a carb, like a starch or a grain? Can be an easy way just to make sure you're kind of hitting each of those components when you're at the dining hall without stressing about it too much. Also, it's okay to pick and choose what you want between stations. Just because you go to one station doesn't mean you're committing to every food that's offered at that station. So it's okay to kind of see what everybody's offering and then make meals based on what sounds good, and get creative with it. If one station is offering chicken, but then they're also having these other foods you don't like, and one station's offering something else, get just the chicken and then go add it to a salad or add it to something that another station's doing. So I think it's okay to kind of pick and choose and create your own meals based on what you like and what can equate to that plate method. Let me see if I can pull up. I do have this one. Okay. This one PowerPoint that I kind of did like a diagram of the different stations. It's the whole thing. But that would be my my recommendation, is to just pick and choose, try to stick towards the plate method, and try to listen to your hunger and fullness cues. I think one thing that can be kind of a trap for people is that if you hang out in the dining hall outside of just meal times, and the food is always available, it can be super easy to overeat. And especially if you are a stress eater, or you snack when you study, or different things like that, learning to pay attention to, do I actually feel hungry? Do I, stop eating when you actually feel full? It takes practice to learn what your body's signals are to tell you when you're hungry and when you're feeling full. But if you start paying attention to it, it becomes a lot more intuitive. And I think learning to listen to those signals can really help kind of gauge how much that you're eating at the dining hall as well, especially when food is always available to you.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? I'm not watching the chat, so if there's questions in the chat, just let me know.
I actually have a question about alcohol.
Yeah.
I have like a specific question, and then I guess a more general question for those who
Okay.
are 21.
Sure.
So I was diagnosed with IBS, which is really fun.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
alcohol is a really big trigger for my symptoms, but like sometimes I want to have a drink. Are there like anything or any alcohols that are like kind of chill on my stomach or something, or anything that like wouldn't upset it as much? Or
Yeah.
anyone else out there, like any other like healthier options, I guess? I don't know.
Sure. In terms of IBS, it can really, like, the trigger foods and things that trigger your IBS can really vary from person to person. I don't know if you've seen a dietitian or if you've done like some type of therapeutic diet to figure out what your trigger foods are, that by doing that, such as like a low FODMAP diet or something like that, that can help, because if you identify what your trigger foods are, you don't have to be as restrictive. But I think that can also apply to alcohol. So notice what types of alcohol trigger your symptoms and avoid those, and it might not be all of them. My guess is that beer probably is going to be a higher carbohydrate, kind of, it's often gluten containing, that also often tends to trigger IBS symptoms. So my guess is that that's not going to be the best option for you. So I would probably try to avoid beer as much as possible, and stick to maybe harder liquors, just because my guess is they're not going to be as tough on your symptoms. And in terms of specific types of like liquors, my guess is that I don't know off the top of my head specifically if there's research done on like which alcohol is better for IBS, because it is so like person to person. But if I had to guess, my guess would be like a vodka or gin or something like that, or tequila is going to be a lot easier than like darker liquors, like whiskey or bourbon or things like that, just based on what their ingredients are. But it's just, I would experiment, and just, if you just bring awareness to it and you know, okay, every time I have this drink, I don't feel that great, that's probably a drink that is triggering you, and try a different one next time. In terms of generalized alcohol questions, I think my approach to everything is drink what you want. I think ultimately, like if you're just thinking like calorie wise, your lower calorie alcohols are going to be those harder liquors. But oftentimes the cocktails and stuff that they're added to have a lot of sugar, have a lot of carbonation, things like that, which is something also to pay attention to, the carbonation for your IBS. And if you get like cocktails or things like that, just pay attention to what comes with like a carbonated beverage with it as like a mixer. But drink what you, I just say, you know, drink what you like, but your lower calorie things are going to just be the harder liquors. It's going to be less calories than beer. And if you're worried about that, try to choose a mixer that is lower in like lower in sugar. Just focus on sugar, because oftentimes there can be a lot of added sugar in cocktails. So that would just be something to pay attention to.
Thank you.
I have a question. So I am not like 100% sure on this. I think I'm like lactose intolerant, but how do you know if you like have an intolerance to like food?
That's a great question. Medically, the only way to know is if you get a certain, if you test for a certain immune response, usually like the IgE or IgG test. But what I usually recommend is doing an elimination diet. So the best way to know, and Cassidy knows this because this is how we figured out that she is gluten sensitive, is by removing whatever food you think triggers you. I usually recommend removing it for about 3 weeks and then including it back in and seeing if it triggers you. So for example, what I did with Cassidy and Anna last year is they were wondering if they were intolerant to lactose and gluten. So I had them follow a dairy-free, gluten-free diet for 3 weeks. It kind of just gets all of that out of the system and just like resets your system. And then what happens is, because it's been reset and it's like completely out of your system, you reintroduce those foods back into your diet. If you're doing more than one food, for example, with them, the lactose and the gluten, you want to do one at a time, because you want to know which is which. So if you removed, for example, lactose and gluten for 3 weeks, then 1 week, just keep eliminating gluten and just include some small amounts of foods that contain lactose, and be super aware of your body and any symptoms. So notice if there's any changes, and then the next week, kind of go back to a lactose gluten-free, and then include gluten foods the next week, and just be aware. And if you notice symptoms, then maybe it's something that will make you feel a lot better to avoid.
Thank you.
Quick question.
Yep.
If you're someone like me who finds it hard to drink a lot of water during the day, do you recommend or know anything about those hydration packets that you can, like, the powdered stuff that you put in your water and it's supposed to increase the hydration by a ton?
I've heard of them. I haven't done a lot of research, like looking into them or how they work. My guess is that they probably, a lot of the times, those types of things just work by increasing the amount of electrolytes that you have. That's, for example, like, that's what the point of Gatorade is, essentially, is just to replenish electrolytes. But I think ultimately, finding strategies that help you remember to drink water is going to always be the best source. So some things that I recommend is, if you have a good, like, get a decent sized water bottle. If you have like a 64-ounce water bottle and you fill that up and you have the goal of, I need to drink 1 of these during a day, that's a really good way to kind of track your water intake. Versus if you're just drinking from a glass, it can be hard to remember. It can be hard to remember to drink water, and it can be hard to know how much that you're drinking. So by getting a water bottle, that can help you track your water intake. And by getting a large water bottle that you don't have to keep refilling, and you can just know, I just have to drink 1 of these, often mindset wise, that can be super helpful. I think if you don't like the taste of water, or it's hard for you to be motivated to drink water, find a way to flavor water that you really enjoy. So if that's infusing fruits and herbs into your water to make it taste better, I really like this brand called True, like they have like True Lime or True Lemon. It's like a natural like fruit powder that you can add to, like, my friend used to carry the True Limes in her purse to add to like drinks when we were out. Like, they're very versatile, and you can use those to flavor your water as well. So I think finding strategies like that work is going to be your best bet.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, hopefully there's not anything that I'm missing in the chat box. If there's no other questions, I know that there were some questions in the like Google form, but I have written out answers to those, so I can always share the PowerPoint with somebody on exec, and they can always share that too if that's needed, just to make sure that everyone's questions get addressed.
Yeah, that would be great. I could definitely send that out too.
Okay, I can kind of throw that together and send it to you later.
Okay, yeah, that's perfect. No rush. But yeah, thank you everyone for coming. If you have any questions, you can always stay after a little bit once people leave. But Erin, that was such a great presentation. I feel like I learned so much, and I have like so many ideas. But yeah,
Good.
awesome.
You're welcome.